Before you cast a stone at me, hear my story. On my 62nd birthday, I was looking forward to a celebratory dinner. I put on my best cashmere sweater, spent time on my hair, dreaming of warm congratulations. But instead of cake and cheerful toasts, I was handed a suitcase as if I were a useless object and shown the door. And that was just the beginning of the nightmare. If you think betrayal is the domain of strangers, wait until it knocks on your door, bearing your last name. Everyone says that a mother's love is unconditional, infinitely patient, all-forgiving, and eternal. I believed it with all my heart. I lived by it. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every school play, I was always there for Ethan Miller, my only son. That morning, I woke up with a flutter in my chest. It was that familiar, poignant warmth of anticipation. 62. I'm alone in my modest little house in Columbus, Ohio, but full of hope. Ethan Miller had been calling less and less lately, excusing himself with crazy work and tense relationships with his wife. But I was sure he would definitely come today. I baked his favorite pancakes, even set the table for two. By noon, I was still sitting alone. My heart ached, but I desperately drove away the despondency. I checked my phone, probably 20 times, rereading old messages, just to feel some kind of connection with him. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I flung it open and saw Ethan Miller, dazzling with that boyish smile that always foreshadowed some kind of mischief. "Happy birthday, Mom," he blurted out, handing me a modest bouquet from the nearest supermarket. My heart ached, but trying not to show it, I hugged my son as hard as I could. "You really came?" I whispered. "Of course. How could I miss it?" he replied, lightly patting me on the back, as if to reassure me. "Get ready. I've booked a table for dinner." I didn't even argue. I grabbed the first coat I could find, a small purse, and put on those shoes that always mercilessly squeezed my toes, but looked so elegant. Inside me, some girlish lightness suddenly awoke, as if I were going to the prom. However, we didn't head towards the city center at all, nor towards a fancy restaurant. The car turned onto a long avenue, lined with maples, whose foliage blazed with all shades of ashen gold and crimson. I glanced at the sign and felt a treacherous twist in my stomach. Willow Creek Assisted Living. "Ethan Miller, what does this mean?" My voice trembled. He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Mom, we need to talk. This can't go on. It's not safe. You live alone, and you have memory lapses." "What memory lapses?" I snapped, feeling a wave of indignation rising inside. He continued to persuade. "I found the perfect place. It's quiet, cozy. You'll be surrounded by peers. There will be something to do." I forced a laugh. It was a pathetic parody of fun, more like a bitter smirk. "Are you kidding me? You brought me here on my birthday." He got out of the car. "Come on, I'll show you around." I seemed to have grown into the seat. Then he opened the trunk. My suitcase, packed in advance, was already waiting. I was stunned, looking at him. "You were rummaging through my things." He sighed heavily. "Don't complicate an already difficult situation." Inside, time seemed to stand still. Strained smiles on the faces at the reception desk, the cloying smell of antiseptic mixed with the smell of overcooked vegetables. He handed over the papers, legal documents, power of attorney, my name, his signature. "It's all over." I didn't shed a tear then. Not yet. I was led to a room with dreary beige walls, an adjustable bed, and a tiny window facing a brick wall. "Here it is, my birthday present." I sat down on the edge of the bed, not taking off my coat, and felt an icy cold creeping into my bones. No cake, no candles, just a crushing silence. The hours dragged on agonizingly slowly. Finally, I unwrapped the bouquet. It drooped, withered from the long car ride. The flowers looked just like I felt, broken and faded. That night, I didn't sleep a wink, listening to the quiet whispers of the nurses, the distant hum of the television coming from the hallway. The hard mattress dug into my back, and the smell of chlorine from the sheets grated in my nose. In my head, like a worn-out record, fragments of conversations with Ethan Miller over the past year were spinning. I desperately tried to see at least some hint, a sign I had missed. I remembered all those yeses that slipped from my lips when I should have shouted no. How I defended him to others, how I borrowed money, how I looked for excuses for his actions. I remembered how I swallowed insults and disappointment because I loved him. But that night, something inside me broke. Something important, fundamental. In the morning, I asked the nurse to bring my phone. She looked guilty and mumbled that my son had already taken care of it, disconnected the line. He said it would be easier for me that way. And then it was like a bucket of ice water had been thrown over me. I understood. I wasn't here to be taken care of. I was here to be erased from the face of the earth. And if I didn't break free from here, they would succeed. But I'm not as fragile as they think. Not by a long shot. For 2 days, I refused food. Not as a protest. I just couldn't swallow a single bite. Not the food. Not the bitter truth. You know, there's something unbearably painful in the way they start treating you, like you're used goods. It leaves such a crack in your soul that it never fully heals. I dedicated my life to my child, poured my heart into building a home, loved to the point of self-forgetfulness. And now? Now I'm just a room number and a faceless medical history. The nurses, for the most part, were nice. But that niceness, when you're locked within 4 walls, feels like a pathetic handout. They called me dearie, as if I were either a 10-year-old child or a 100-year-old wreck. No one asked what my life used to be like. No one cared about my hobbies. In their eyes, I was just another forgetful old woman in slippers. How wrong they were. I remembered everything, down to the smallest details. My roommate, Ethel, slept all day and shook the room with her snoring at night. She didn't talk much, but when she did open her mouth, it was only about those who had forgotten her years ago. I listened because I understood that pain too well, the pain of loneliness and oblivion. I desperately tried to keep my mind clear. I watched the news in the common room, pored over crossword puzzles that were left in the hallway, and again, for the umpteenth time, I reread my favorite novel. But inside me, some kind of viscous, dark emptiness was growing. And then, on the 4th day, like a ray of light, Tiffany appeared. She was actually off duty. A nurse had fallen ill, and this young girl, with braids neatly tucked under her cap and with an amazingly kind look, came in as a replacement. She was taking my blood pressure when she suddenly said, "You don't belong here." I was taken aback, staring at her. She smiled, trying to reassure me. "Don't get me wrong. Many people need help, and that's okay. But you don't seem lost." I blinked frequently, trying to hold back the suddenly welling tears. We started talking. She asked about Ethan Miller. I told her everything I could, trying not to break down. She listened, not just nodding politely, but really listening, with all her heart. Later that day, she came back, hiding something in her hand. "This belonged to Mr. Harrison, "One of our residents who passed away last week," she whispered. "We found it tucked inside his Bible. No one came forward to claim it." It was a lottery ticket, folded several times, slightly yellowed with age, dated 2 weeks earlier. I chuckled, dryly and painfully. "And you're suggesting I try my luck?" She winked, her eyes sparkling mischievously. "Hey, the world owes you one." I wasn't going to rush, but boredom and despair, a devilish cocktail. That night, waiting for the hallway to fall silent, I crept into the lounge. The institution's ancient computer shuddered as I entered the numbers. My hand froze over the key. My eyes darted frantically across the screen. 1.5 million. I frantically covered my mouth with my hands, looking around. Empty. The silence pressed on my eardrums. It wasn't elation. No, it was chilling horror. If Ethan Miller finds out. If anyone finds out. With trembling fingers, I printed out the confirmation, crumpled it into a tiny ball, and hid it in my bra, right next to my heart. The next day, I took Tiffany aside. "I need a confidential consultation with a lawyer." She didn't ask questions. She just nodded understandingly. Tiffany knew a volunteer lawyer who helped the elderly with wills and other paperwork twice a month. I waited for Friday, like a sentence. My heart was pounding wildly. Samuel turned out to be young, insightful, and, most importantly, discreet. In the cramped break room, like conspirators, I handed him the lottery printout and whispered with my lips, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows shot up, but not a muscle on his face twitched. "We need to act fast," his calm but firm voice sounded. The next hours passed in a feverish rush. Documents, signatures, assurances, financial machinations, a new phone, a fake mailbox. He contacted an independent financial genius who instantly organized an impenetrable blind trust. My name disappeared from all records, as if it had never existed. Ethan Miller would never pick up my trail. I signed a new will, bequeathing all my fortune to charity, anonymously for now. Ethan Miller had already signed my death warrant once. I won't let him do it a second time. Tiffany hugged me on the night of my escape, her voice trembling with emotion. "Don't forget us when you break free," she whispered, holding me tight. Tears froze somewhere deep inside. I couldn't afford weakness. Just before dawn, I slipped out of the house like a shadow, dressed in someone else's clothes, clutching a worn duffel bag filled with essentials. They thought I was broken, helpless, alone. Let them think that. I was going to become a ghost with $1.5 million. Let them try to find me. They'd never see me coming. The bus ride from Ohio stretched on forever, quiet, cold, and exhausting. I huddled in the very back, pulling the hood low over my face, hiding my eyes behind dark glasses, and clung to that damned duffel bag as if it held my soul. In a way, it did. I had no idea what awaited me. I only knew one thing. I had to run as far as possible, so no one could find me. Not Ethan Miller, nor his righteous wife, nor the pack of lawyers he had undoubtedly already unleashed. Samuel helped me acquire a modest house under a new name, held in trust, in the backwoods of Tennessee. A backwater, certainly, but quite habitable. No security cameras, no nosy neighbors, just a safe distance between me and the life I had left behind. As we crossed the Kentucky border, I was able to exhale for the first time in hours. Freedom had a taste, and it was far from sweet. More like metallic, like blood and suppressed fear. The house wasn't grand, a one-story brick box with peeling paint and a lopsided mailbox. But the heater worked, the water ran clean, and, most importantly, it was quiet. Not the oppressive silence of a nursing home where people had given up on themselves. This was a silence that allowed you to breathe deeply. I lived like a shadow for the next few days. I cooked simple meals, checked the mailbox, sat on the porch for hours wrapped in an old blanket, and watched the wind chase fallen leaves across the yard, as if reminding me of the transience of all things. I lived on edge, glued to the news feed, waiting maniacally to see my name in screaming bold print. Runaway wins jackpot of $1.5 million. Son raises alarm about her unstable mental state. But so far, an ominous silence. The winning lottery ticket, like a time bomb, was stored in a fireproof box hidden under a floorboard in the hallway closet. There, next to it, lay a freshly printed copy of my will, a disposable phone, and a short note for whoever found it, just in case. About a week after my escape from the hated Willow Creek assisted living, the silence of my refuge was shattered by a rude knock on the door. I froze. How had they found me? I hadn't told anyone my location. I hadn't even used a credit card to avoid leaving a trail. My heart pounded like a frantic drum, beating out a panicked rhythm. Creeping, tiptoeing, I made my way to the window and cautiously peeked out. Just a delivery man. Groceries. Part of the covert plan Samuel had devised. And yet, a chilling sense of inevitability lingered. That same day, curiosity, like a snake, coiled around my mind, robbing me of the last vestiges of peace. I created a fake Facebook profile and typed Ethan Miller's name into the search bar. And there he was, beaming a radiant smile in his profile picture, as if the world hadn't collapsed overnight. In his latest post, full of despair, he pleaded, "If anyone has seen my mother, Eleanor Miller, please contact me or the Columbus police. She disappeared several days ago. We're all terribly worried," the post read. And then the abyss of comments opened up. Prayers, words of support, admiration for Ethan Miller for his caring son's heart. I was seized by hysterical laughter through tears. Oh, they had no idea. None of them even suspected the truth. But it wasn't the post itself that finished me off. It was the photo he attached. Fresh, as he wanted to show, but taken 5 years ago. One of the last birthdays we celebrated together. Really together. I'm wearing a silly, shiny hat, and he's hugging me. We look happy. God, how easy it is to fool a camera lens. That night, sleep fled from me like the plague. I froze in a chair in front of the fireplace, and thoughts, like birds of prey, circled in my head. And the longer I sat, the darker this carousel became. I remembered all the times I had given Ethan Miller money, every loan, every lie. I remembered how skillfully he made me doubt myself, subtly but methodically. His little phrases tossed off carelessly. "Mom, you already told me that," even though I hadn't said a word, or, "You've become quite forgetful lately." I believed I was just getting old. I blamed myself for it. But no, it wasn't my fault. Not at all. He sought to plant the seed of doubt in me, so that when his shadow loomed over my life, I wouldn't find the strength to resist. But enough. Enough being a puppet. Early in the morning, like a thief, I dialed Samuel's number from a disposable SIM card. My voice trembled, but my words were firm. I need to update my will urgently. He, as always, didn't ask unnecessary questions. "What changes, Eleanor?" His calm voice sounded. "I want absolute clarity. Ethan Miller will receive nothing, not a single dollar, not a trinket, not even a memory." "It will be done," he replied, and I heard echoes of sympathy in his voice. You are safe now, Eleanor. But I didn't feel safe. Not at all. Deep down, a premonition of trouble was brewing, and I knew I had to be prepared for the worst. It all started with a letter, an ordinary envelope without a single identifying mark, lost among the electricity bills and advertising junk. I would have passed by without paying attention if it weren't for the paper. Thick, expensive, it seemed to scream about its significance. As soon as I touched it, I felt a tight knot in my stomach. Inside was just one sheet, a photocopy, my signature, or rather, its pathetic imitation. Below, two more. One belonged to my late husband, Clarence, and the other to Ethan Miller. It was a loan document, dated 12 years earlier. A huge sum, a personal loan, made out to Clarence and me. The bank's logo was genuine. Like a notary's stamp, the seal lay on the document, but my signature, I never, you hear, never put it there. My hands trembled as I slumped onto the worn sofa. The paper in my hands felt alien. The handwriting in the document was painfully familiar, every flourish of the letter G in my name, Eleanor. But something was off. Too perfect, too polished. My Samuel would never stoop to such meanness. And this Ethan Miller, he was always as silent as a fish. I rushed to the old fireproof box, pulled out a battered folder, a legacy that Samuel had helped me collect, fragments of our financial transactions, saved before my escape. There, inside, were 3 more forms, and on each, that vile, fake signature. An icy horror gripped me. Ethan Miller had been robbing Clarence and me for years. That's the answer. The strange tension of recent years. How Clarence avoided talking about money. How our savings dwindled before our eyes. How Ethan Miller constantly needed money for an emergency, and yet drove a brand new car out of the dealership every year. Quiet squabbles at night that I attributed to work troubles. Ruined vacations. Failed investments. I blamed age, the unstable market. Bad luck. But it was him, Ethan Miller. All this time he had been methodically robbing us, and I saw nothing. There were no tears. Not now. Instead, I opened my laptop and plunged into a vortex of information. For 3 days, as if in a daze, I pieced together the fragments of truth. Ethan Miller, that little snake, forged a whole pile of loan documents using Clarence's and my Social Security numbers. The amounts varied. Some dissolved into the general mass of debts. Clarence apparently managed to pay off most of it, taking the shame with him to the grave. But one account, like a bleeding wound, glared with a balance of $30-something thousand, and it was paid off under my name, just 3 months before they shipped me off to this Willow Creek assisted living home. I sat in the pitch darkness of the tiny living room in Tennessee. The white laptop screen glowed in the night like a beacon, and my hands, clenched until my knuckles ached, trembled with rage. This was not just betrayal. It was blatant theft, vile fraud, a real crime. I dialed Samuel's number again. "I have new information," my voice trembled, despite my best efforts. "Forged documents, loans. This is Ethan Miller's doing." "I believe you," he replied calmly. "Do you want to press charges?" I wasn't ready yet. Not that doubts tormented me. They were a thing of the past. It's just that I longed for him to taste fear first, to feel the oppressive silence of the unknown. Let him wonder if I know. Because now I wasn't hiding in the shadows. I went hunting. I frantically collected all the evidence, every piece of paper I could find. Any bill that mentioned my name, old emails, every financial notice that Ethan Miller had ever sent me. I even tracked down the bank we had worked with a long time ago and, under the guise of legal necessity, skillfully. Formulated by Samuel, requested archival records. Piece by piece, like a puzzle, a picture emerged that made my blood run cold. It turns out that Ethan Miller took out a loan at a predatory interest rate, using our old business, the very catering business that Clarence and I had created in the 80s, from scratch, right in our garage. He used this LLC, which strangely enough was still listed as active, to obtain a line of credit for no less than $200,000. And Clarence's signature was on it. 2 years after his death. This was not just betrayal, not just an immoral act. It was a full-blown federal fraud. Everything I had was now under lock and key. An encrypted folder, a backup on a separate drive, and a paper copy hidden in a cubby under the floorboards. Time was slipping through my fingers like sand. If Ethan Miller was as desperate as I suspected, if he had even the slightest thread leading to me and the $1.5 million, he wouldn't wait long. Have you ever looked at someone you thought you knew your whole life and realized they were a stranger? That's how I felt. Each page of documents exposing my son's monstrous web of lies and deceit churned my stomach. The boy I once cradled in my arms had morphed into a dangerous stranger. I verified every last fact. Ethan Miller had forged my signature, defrauded banks, manipulated my late husband, using him as a shield, and all under the guise of a loving and devoted son. But the most chilling truth came to light through a simple public record search. With a little help from Samuel, I found it. Ethan Miller was the subject of a federal investigation for tax fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. Identity theft. The words pierced me like shards of glass. With trembling fingers, I opened the case file. The details were mostly redacted, but the gist of the allegations was crystal clear. Ethan Miller, my son, was creating fake IDs, grossly inflating income, fabricating deductions, and filing bogus tax returns to siphon money through refunds. Some of the IDs belonged to the deceased, others to the elderly, and some were real people, including me. The IRS report stated, in black and white, that multiple returns had been filed in my name over the past 3 years. I had no idea. It was like a grenade had detonated in my mind. I stared blankly at the screen, trying to piece together the fragments of my thoughts. Had he planned to rob me from the start? Was that the real reason for his relentless push to get me into that nursing home and take away my phone? It wasn't care, no. It was containment. He wanted to silence me, disorient me, so I wouldn't interfere with his dirty dealings. My own son. He had used my identity as a weapon, my name as a tool in his criminal schemes. And when the heat was on, he planned to dispose of me like an inconvenient piece of evidence in his sordid story. Me? His mother? But now I am not just a loose end. I am the one holding it. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I immersed myself in documentation. Every lie, every loan taken out, every fraudulent squiggle on paper. I printed out the evidence, stuffed it into thick manila folders, and dated them. I started recording audio notes, not out of fear of forgetting, but so that my voice would be the last thing they heard if something happened to me. Then I made a decision. I anonymously sent a copy of the entire archive to the Department of Justice. Not to reveal myself, not yet, but to plant a seed of doubt. They would have the proof. If I disappeared, they would know where to look. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew. I started noticing cars parked outside the house for extended periods. A man knocked on the door one day, claiming to be conducting a survey. I didn't open it. I just watched him from behind the curtain, phone in hand. Every knock, every ring made me jump. But I didn't run. Not this time. I dialed Samuel's number. "We need to finalize the trust," I told him, "and the will too. I want everything protected." He agreed. Everything was set up under my new name, following the necessary legal formalities. In case of any claims from the previous name, appropriate legal actions will be taken. But despite all the precautions, emotional turmoil would surface in moments of silence. I remembered the past years, the bright moments associated with that name. Memories of childhood, youth, how relationships changed over time. I wondered when the changes began, how the distance gradually grew. Perhaps it's a difficult situation when you watch what's happening and hope for the best. But now I realized the situation and decided to take control of my life, to determine the further course of events myself. A letter arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. The handwriting was recognizable, sharp, slanted strokes, as if the writer was in a hurry to finish. Inside was a short message. "I am aware of your actions, and this is not over." I reread it several times. Then I smiled weakly, not out of joy, but because it was consistent with my perception of his character. No words about him needing me or being interested in my whereabouts. Just a formal message. I folded the document. I carefully filled out the necessary forms and placed them in the folder with important papers. At that point, my absence had lasted about 3 weeks. Ethan Miller organized something akin to a public display of concern, seeking help in finding me, giving comments to the media, portraying himself as a grieving relative searching for his lost loved one. It would have been strange if it weren't so unsettling. And, as I suspected, he took specific actions. An official letter arrived from the court in Columbus, sent with notification. With some trepidation, I signed for it and sat down at my desk to read its contents. He had initiated a legal procedure concerning my capacity. My breath caught in my throat. The document contained statements from several people claiming that my behavior had been inconsistent lately. Among them was an acquaintance from the past and a college friend I barely knew. Ethan Miller's lawyer also submitted audio recordings, excerpts from old voicemails I had left in moments of sadness or simply to discuss issues. These recordings had been edited and altered. They portrayed me in a negative light, as someone struggling. He even included a document drafted by a specialist I hadn't consulted, expressing concern about my departure and the peculiarities of my behavior. They sought to have my assets temporarily frozen, to gain access to managing my property, to influence my return. I felt deeply shaken. Samuel arrived that evening. He reviewed everything, and his reaction was restrained. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," he said finally. "But Eleanor, you need to remain calm. You need to think clearly. They're expecting an emotional reaction from you." I agreed, feeling overwhelmed. The following days were filled with tension. Samuel hired a skilled lawyer to prepare for the proceedings. We gathered the necessary papers, video conference recordings, financial documents, and even a journal, confirming my sound mind throughout the time after my departure. An independent assessment of my condition was arranged. A specialist, a pleasant person named Dr. Sterling, visited my home and spent several hours with me. She asked questions about my life, about my late husband, about Ethan Miller. I shared my concerns with her. She listened attentively and asked important questions. Before leaving, she expressed the opinion that I was exhibiting clarity of thought. This brought some relief. However, the situation remained tense. Information about the upcoming hearing became public. In the online space, where people had previously sympathized with the story of the missing person, questions began to arise. People started to wonder why I hadn't contacted other people and whether someone was influencing the situation. Such stories attract attention, and Ethan Miller probably understood this. But now I felt more confident, as I had not only the facts, but also the determination to get to the bottom of what was happening. In the quiet of my home, I began to create a video recording. I hadn't published it yet, but I wanted to prepare for any possible difficulties. I looked into the camera and said, "My name is Eleanor Miller. I am of sound mind and have encountered a situation caused by someone I trusted very much." I remained calm. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stated the facts because I sensed what might happen. And this time, I wouldn't be in the role of the defendant. The courthouse in Columbus looked the same as it had years ago when I visited to pay a small fine and waited in a room with other people hoping to sort out their affairs. Then, I was a wife, a parent, a person who believed in the possibility of redemption. Now, I was in a role requiring protection. Samuel advised me to choose a restrained but confident outfit, something that said, "I'm here to be heard, not to beg for leniency." I chose a navy blue coat with silver details, an old watch that had belonged to my husband, and comfortable shoes that made a quiet sound as I walked through the courthouse corridors. Ethan Miller was already in the courtroom when I arrived. He stood up as I entered, as if following a prearranged plan. A certain unease was reflected on his face. He even tried to smile, which might have seemed benevolent to outsiders, but I knew it wasn't sincere. His intentions were far from friendly. The judge, an experienced person with a discerning gaze, announced the hearing on the matter of Eleanor Miller's capacity. His words sounded weighty. Ethan Miller's lawyer was the first to speak, a tall man with clear speech and a confident demeanor. He presented the information in an organized manner. Eleanor is absent. Eleanor is exhibiting unusual behavior. Eleanor may be under the influence. There was a definite risk to Eleanor and her resources. He had provided an expert opinion from someone I had not had the opportunity to speak with, and presented audio materials manipulated to create a distorted impression. I heard myself speaking in a confused, anxious, perhaps even agitated manner, presented out of context. I saw the judge's reaction and felt my hands clench. Then Ethan Miller spoke. "Your Honor," he said, his voice restrained, "I have a deep affection for my mother. This is a difficult ordeal. It seems to me that she is being influenced. She seems changed. She is disoriented." Then I rose. "Now it's my turn, Your Honor." The judge nodded. I walked slowly to the stand, allowing the significance of my appearance to register. Then I began to speak. "My name is Eleanor Miller. I am 62 years old. I do not have any mental limitations. I am not disoriented, and I am not being manipulated by anyone." I carefully opened my folder and handed the judge a copy of Dr. Sterling's complete medical evaluation, signed, dated, and sealed. The evaluation? Fully competent, no evidence of cognitive impairment, emotionally stable. I noticed the muscles in the attorney's back tense. Ethan Miller's expression changed. Then I continued. "I have here," I said, holding up a second folder, "a record of all phone calls I made in the week before my departure, confirmation of the transfer of funds to a trust, medical records in order, and a notarized statement from the attorney who assisted me in leaving the facility, confirming that I was of sound mind, coherent, and fully in control of my actions." I paused. "And there is something else. which I will not present at this time, only if necessary. I did not disclose the information containing details of financial transactions and documents related to Ethan Miller. This was my fallback strategy. Instead, I addressed the judge. He placed me in a specialized facility without my consent. He restricted my communication with the outside world, restricted my freedom of movement, and now he seeks to deprive me of the remnants of my autonomy. I ask you, do not allow it. A silence fell over the courtroom. Samuel sat beside me, calm and supportive. His gaze conveyed approval and confidence. The judge pondered, reviewing the materials presented. I need time to review all the documents and the medical evaluation. There were no negatively disposed individuals around me. There was only me. Only Eleanor Miller. A woman who cared for him, who made concessions, who was more lenient than any mother should have been. And he dared to present me as someone devoid of her own will. It was at that moment that I realized. The internal dissent I felt was no longer sufficient. I needed to take action. I contacted Samuel and asked to meet with him. When he arrived, I gave him a sealed envelope containing the collected materials. Information on questionable financial transactions. Documents relating to tax returns filed by Ethan Miller using my information. Pass this on, I said. Not to the authorities, but to the appropriate agency anonymously. He opened the envelope, reviewed the contents, and nodded. This might get their attention. I hope it does. But I had other plans as well. That same evening, using a different name and a new online account, I made a significant contribution, a large sum, to a national organization that supports older adults in matters of financial security. Without attribution, just a transfer of funds. Within days, they began an informational campaign, using my situation as an example. They didn't mention my name, but the timing was very deliberate. Discussions began. People shared information and asked questions. How does a person disappear and then reappear with resources, while their close relative tries to restrict their abilities? The discussion spread rapidly online. Something's not right with the son. Let him speak. Why wasn't her perspective heard? I don't trust him very much. The carefully maintained image of Ethan Miller began to crack. Then something happened that I didn't expect. A press representative from a well-known publication contacted Samuel. She was interested in hearing my side of the story. She assured anonymity. No specific names, no visual materials, just the facts. I agreed to meet. We met in a quiet cafe located in another city. I tried to be inconspicuous. We settled in a secluded spot. She turned on a recording device and gave me the opportunity to tell my story. I had shared information about the facility, how I was placed there without prior notice, and how Ethan Miller restricted my access to communication, finances, and my personal freedom. I had yet to mention the ruse. When she asked about legal matters, I replied, "He's trying to gain control over my life." Soon after, the story broke. Parent or profiteer? Eleanor M's story. Silenced. It didn't take long for readers to draw their own conclusions. Speculation began to swirl online. Was the missing parent the anonymous benefactor? Was that why her son was seeking guardianship? The rumors and suspicions intensified. However, I remained calm. Ethan Miller's downfall wouldn't come from a direct accusation, but from the consequences of his actions. A few days before the next hearing, Samuel received a call from the authorities. They had received the information we'd passed along and had begun an investigation. Ethan Miller was unaware that while he was presenting his version of events in court and publicly, I was taking steps that could have serious implications for his standing. The second hearing felt more charged, partly due to the weather, but mostly because of the changed atmosphere. Ethan Miller entered the courtroom looking less confident than before. His demeanor was less assertive. His lawyer was in deep discussion with him as they took their seats. They had noticed the shift in public sentiment. They could feel the mounting pressure. I remained composed, holding my documents in my hands. Fear had given way to resolve. Not the explosive kind, but the kind focused on achieving a goal. This time, we were taking the first steps. Samuel began with a statement that drew everyone's attention in the courtroom. "Your Honor," he began, "since the previous hearing, we have conducted a comprehensive independent assessment, providing detailed financial information, confirming Mrs. Eleanor Miller's self-sufficiency and stability, and established through public records that the petitioner, Mr. Ethan Miller, is the subject of a federal inquiry regarding a number of financial activities, including misuse of information and potential tax violations." He handed the judge a copy of the publicly available list of cases. Ethan Miller's lawyer immediately objected. "This inquiry is irrelevant to—" The judge cut him off with a gesture. "Order, please." Silence fell over the courtroom. Then came the crucial testimony. Dr. Sterling, our independent specialist, took the stand. She was calm, competent, and to the point. She confirmed that I had the necessary capacity and possessed a stable emotional state and understood the consequences of my actions, including the decision to leave Willow Creek Assisted Living. She not only demonstrates clarity of thought, Dr. Sterling noted, she is detail-oriented and capable of analysis. There is no medical basis for restricting her capacity. I glanced over at Ethan Miller. His hands were gripping the table tightly, the tension evident. His expression, that carefully maintained facade of concern, was beginning to crack. Then Samuel presented additional information, a timeline of events. It detailed when Ethan Miller began taking steps to access my financial resources and how it coincided with withdrawals he was making related to issues in his business ventures. Coincidence? Unlikely. The judge carefully reviewed the presented materials. Ethan Miller was given the opportunity to speak. He rose, his voice sounding uncertain. "My mother needs support. She's clearly being influenced. She wouldn't make this decision if she weren't confused or uncertain. This isn't her normal behavior." At that moment, I stood up and addressed him directly. "I am acting deliberately," I said. Everyone fell silent. "I am the person who supported you through difficult times when you were young and needed help, who sacrificed personal interests, who found ways to pay for your education, who tried to make you happy, even when it was difficult. I am the one who was always there, and you left me in a difficult situation as if I don't matter." I turned to the judge. "And now, Your Honor, I hope I will be allowed to show that this is not the case." The judge listened intently, considering every word, and said calmly, "Mrs. Miller, considering the provided materials, the expert opinion, and the discrepancies in the petitioner's testimony, I am dismissing this case. Your financial resources and personal freedom are fully restored. The court finds you to be self-sufficient and independent." I maintained my composure, but my hands trembled slightly as I gathered my documents and left the courtroom. Ethan Miller remained silent as I passed by. In his eyes I saw not resentment, but rather concern. He understood that the situation had shifted, at least in this chapter. What he didn't know was that while he was busy questioning my position, I was dedicating my time to building something significant, a project, and I kept working on it. The phone call came late in the evening. Samuel's voice was serious but calm. "It has begun. The formal investigation. Ethan Miller's name is on the list." I remained silent, simply observing the movement of the tree branches outside my window. In a way, I had anticipated this. But when it happened, I didn't feel triumphant. It felt like a logical progression of events. The following morning, events unfolded rapidly. First came the media attention. Ethan Miller, whose family was recently linked to an elder abuse case, is now the subject of federal scrutiny. My name wasn't directly mentioned, but the connection was clear. They recalled the incident, the proceedings, the source of support, the woman who faced difficulties but remained persistent throughout the process. Now their seemingly impeccable son was facing trouble, and they wanted information from me. I refrained from commenting for 2 days, limiting my use of electronic devices and ignoring calls. I cooked for myself, watched the birds in the yard, and engaged in writing exercises with no intention of sending what I wrote. But silence isn't a solution. It was time to act. I contacted Anna, a press contact I had met previously. I informed her that I was ready to provide an on-the-record statement this time. No anonymity, no distortion. We scheduled a meeting for the near future, with a detailed piece in the news. She asked if I was sure. "I've never been more sure," I replied. On the day of the interview, I chose a neutral style. A solid colored top, simple jewelry, minimal makeup, no preparation, just the facts. We were in a quiet room with comfortable lighting. Anna showed genuine interest. "Eleanor, the public is familiar with the general information. They know about Ethan Miller, about the situation. But what remains behind the scenes? What are the reasons for your decision now?" I looked directly into the camera. "Because it's not just about my situation," I said. "It's about the many families who have faced similar difficulties, about the elderly who feel isolated and forgotten. I almost ended up in a similar situation, and I want to talk about it." Then I shared my story. The specialized facility, the unexpected opportunity, the truth I uncovered, the materials I gathered and submitted. I tried not to leave anything out. I noticed empathy in Sarah's eyes as I spoke, but I remained calm. That night, the interview aired. Many people watched. The responses began to pour in. People from different places shared their experiences with difficult situations, feelings of loneliness, and overcoming hardships. I became a voice that reflected their experiences. Ethan Miller made no public statements, but according to reports, he was very concerned about what was happening, and his position had become unstable. This was a consequence of his actions. But I didn't feel any satisfaction. Instead, I focused on what to do next. I considered starting an organization aimed at helping elderly individuals facing legal and financial difficulties. The plan was to provide not only consultations, but also practical legal support and financial assistance. I named it the Eleanor Project, aiming to ensure that the name used to cause harm would now serve to restore justice. Despite this, unpleasant memories remained, not because of the problems Ethan Miller was facing, but because of the feelings I once held so strongly. Now, I had to get used to a new reality. But now I had something valuable, the knowledge of the truth, which no one could dispute. News of the legal proceedings against Ethan Miller appeared in the media. Ethan Miller indicted on financial charges. I learned about it while calmly drinking tea in the morning with my cat. The house was quiet, with only the sound of the refrigerator running and the gentle noise of the wind. For a long time, I simply studied the article, not because I doubted its content. I accepted it, but because I had thought about the situation so many times, and when it happened, it felt familiar. He was released under certain conditions. Financial resources can provide a respite, though they don't solve all problems. But his reputation had suffered. His name became associated with a breach of trust. Former clients declined to work with him. Financial transactions had been restricted. Some acquaintances distanced themselves. Even his wife made a statement through a representative. She had initiated divorce proceedings. Now he was alone. One would think I should feel satisfaction, but I felt only emptiness. Experiencing something like that leaves a mark. It makes you more aware, perhaps more attentive, resilient. But you lose some of the old naivete, that boundless faith that closeness can prevent a misstep. I didn't regret that loss. I accepted it. One day, for the first time after the publication of the materials, I appeared in public. People recognized me. They didn't whisper. They didn't stare. They expressed friendliness. One woman, of mature age, gently touched my hand and said, "You helped my mother make an important decision." A young man working in a pharmacy slipped a small message into my shopping bag. "My grandmother sends her thanks." I didn't seek this attention, but it came quietly, like light after a storm. Samuel came that day. He has been offered certain conditions. He said, a restriction of freedom for a certain period if he admits his guilt. Otherwise, the case will be considered in due course. "And him?" I asked, trying to maintain neutrality. "He thinks he can find a way out of the situation." I expressed my disagreement. "He hasn't been entirely honest for a long time." Samuel paused for a moment. "He still hasn't tried to contact you?" I caught his gaze, not directly, but I understood the hint. A message in a plain envelope appeared at my door one evening when I was home. Inside was a picture. It was from my birthday. I'm in light clothes, smiling, with traces of food on my face. Ethan Miller is next to me holding a carving utensil, also smiling. On the back, there was only one sentence, written in familiar handwriting. "You always supported me. I'm sorry it wasn't enough." I spent a lot of time with this photo. Not grieving excessively, not feeling angry, but just reflecting. Remembering the child who wanted to hear one more story before bedtime. The young man who damaged my car and was upset when I didn't scold him. The adult who hugged me tighter than usual on the day his father passed away. These were all facets of his personality, and I accepted them. But acceptance, sincere acceptance, requires honesty. And Ethan Miller chose dishonesty. That evening, I put the photo in the fire. Not out of dislike, but to gain freedom. I watched as the fire touched the paper, darkened the edges, changed the expression on the face in the picture. I didn't need the picture to remember. I needed peace. And I almost achieved it. In the morning, I returned to Willow Creek Assisted Living. The sky was bright, muting the colors of the world, but not hiding it. I stood in front of the building for a while, looking at the place where I had been left. The parking lot was quiet. The trees were without leaves, but something had changed. The doors opened, and Tiffany came out to meet me before I could knock. She expressed surprise at seeing me. "Eleanor?" I smiled. "It's me." We hugged, not formally, but as two people who had been through a certain experience. Her hands were warm, and I realized how long it had been since I had felt support. Inside, everything looked refreshed. The floors were clean. The lighting was more comfortable. There were new books in the common room, a modern viewing device, and a beverage maker. I know what you did, Tiffany said, leading me to a bench in the hallway. Information support, communication. Eleanor, you made positive changes. No, I replied. I just became more independent. We walked through the hallways together. I visited Ethel's old room. Now it was a reading room. The staff looked up. Some smiled. Some were surprised. Several residents recognized me. I greeted each of them. They became more visible, as did I. That day, I shared my thoughts in the new activity room. Folding chairs were set up, and the staff had prepared refreshments. Tiffany introduced me as someone who had achieved success, but I shook my head. I'm not here because of financial well-being, I began, and not because of personal resentment. I'm here because I wasn't given the opportunity to speak, and I know how many of you feel the same way. Everyone looked at me attentively. Some had sympathy in their eyes. I want to tell you what I would have liked to hear in the past, I said. You are important. You are remembered. And you still have opportunities. Applause followed, first restrained, then louder. I smiled, feeling the sadness that had accumulated for a long time replaced by a sense of hope and support. Returning home, I completed the preparation of the documents. Project Eleanor was envisioned as an organization dedicated to assisting elderly individuals in need of support. We would recruit specialists, arrange consultations, and establish connections with institutions and organizations. Ethan Miller agreed to collaborate for a limited time. He attempted to send another message, but I returned it unread. That chapter was closed. In the final days of the year, I devoted my time to writing thank you notes to those who had supported me. Samuel, Tiffany, and Dr. Sterling. I expressed my gratitude not for rescuing me from hardship, but for standing by me as I navigated it on my own. Then, with the first snowfall of January, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter to myself. It was concise, only a single page. I read it aloud, sitting by the fireplace, with a pet nestled comfortably nearby. Dear Eleanor, you were not wrong. You were not too open. You were not defenseless. You were simply a human being with deep feelings. And when someone tried to diminish your role in your own life, you found a way to determine the outcome yourself. I am proud of you. With warmth, you. I folded the letter, placed it in a small wooden box, and set it on the mantelpiece. I didn't need wealth, retribution, or a triumph of justice. I had found something far more valuable: freedom. And I felt more independent than ever before.